Hi guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back with another video. This video is featuring some new products and some old from Erin Lee Creative. She had a Christmas release a couple of weeks ago, absolutely beautiful stuff, and then I have some old favorites. In addition, I'm also going to be using the infinity ornaments from Hero Arts. I know you guys are like me and you like to get kind of like the most out of your products that you have. And stencils are really popular right now and they're a great, easy way to create a really beautiful layered look. And we're going to talk about how we can kind of stretch those by incorporating die cutting into our stenciling to create completely different cards and maybe get something else out of the products that you have. Before we get too far into it, I do want to say if you're interested in any of these products, Erin Lee is, she's almost always having sales, honestly, guys. She's pretty great. So she has 60% off her markdowns. She has 25% off of paper and of cardstock, and she has great like mirrored cardstock. That stained glass technique I did with her mirrored cardstock, or her glossy white white cardstock. And then she also has lots of like glitter, and which is really great. But then she has 20% off everything else. So if you're looking for something that she's got a great sale going on, no coupon code needed. It's taken off in your cart automatically. All right, now with that out of the way, let's move on to the card. So I did a little bit of ink blending after I outlined the size of the ornament. I did some speckled egg in the background, just so it wouldn't be stark white ornament. And now I'm going in, this is the first layer of the Cardinal. This one actually came out last year and I didn't get a chance to use it. I think it's a beautiful stencil. So I'm just doing a couple of different reds. This also has the berries included. It's funny because when I was doing this, at some point, and I don't even know when it occurred, I switched my lids for my barn door and for my abandoned coral. And I don't know when it happened, but I do know that later on when I was doing the barn, you'll see it in a little while. It's a long video. We got a long ways to go. When I was doing the barn, I was like, this is much darker than abandoned coral. And then sure enough, I flipped them over and I had switched the lids. So thankfully, the barn was supposed to be bright. But anyway, so here, this is done. And I do, because I like to mention, I do like to layer my colors. You certainly don't have to do that, but I enjoy layering my colors. Now, this is a boo-boo that I made. Don't do what I did, do what I say. So originally, I was like laying them down and going through them. And I knew I needed an orange beak and a black portion, and for some reason I reversed them in my head. So I put down my wild honey and then my crackling campfire, and then I went in with some browns and did the branch that the bird is sitting on. And then once I removed my stencil, I realized that the part that I just did orange actually was supposed to be black. Thankfully, it wasn't the other way around, because the other way around, I wouldn't have been able to fix it. I would have had to start over. But since it was this way, I could see, I was like, that doesn't look right. So I cleaned off my stencil, and then I went ahead and put the previous one back on, and then I could just go right over that orange with my black soot, and nobody will be any the wiser. Like, my recipient will not know when I give them my card, but we will, because we watched it happen. So once I got the black down, now I can go back in with those oranges. So again, wild honey down first, and then I used a little bit of crackling campfire. You'll see for the majority of this video, I am using my Trinity blending buddies because they put down a lot of color and it's super saturated and it doesn't take me a lot of effort, and I love them. But for those smaller areas, I am going in and using some other detailed brushes. I think the ones that I just used were the rabbit hole. I also have some from Altenew that I use, and what's the other one? I can't remember. But anyway, sometimes like if you really enjoy stenciling, it may be worth it to invest in some of the detail ones, because it does make it easier to get into those tinier areas. So here, after I did the wing, I realized that I didn't have any shading underneath it. And so I just went back to the first stencil, put that down, added some aged mahogany so that I would have some depth there. And then the Cardinal is done. So what I'm doing now is, you guys, I actually used this last year, this mistletoe stencil, and I love it. I think it's beautiful. Nothing's changed. I still think it's great. That's why it came back again this year. So I'm doing this mistletoe stencil in the background to fill up my ornament. You could use other things. I just really liked this because I had the red cardinal already. And so I can put this in the background and fill up the area. Now, I'm not necessarily paying attention to like how full the whole card is going to be, because remember, I have that outline that I put down for my ornament, so I know where the berries that will be seen are going to go. Here, I didn't push down my stencil into my sticky mat, and so it did move on me. You can see that one berry almost directly in the center is a little bit like smushed, but by the time I add in the leaves and put the green over the red, you can't really see it, so not a huge deal, but that's just my word of caution to you. Make sure that if you're using a sticky mat, or Waffle Flower has their own that like fit in the Misty, if you're using any of those things, just make sure you push the stencil down into it or it ain't gonna hold. It will not hold. It's just laying there then. So then basically you guys know how I do this if I'm doing something in multiple steps. I just work assembly line style. So I did all my berries first, then I'm going to come back in. The first layer I am going to do with mowed lawn so that it is a much lighter green. And then the second layer I will do with the rustic wilderness. This one right here does go over my bird. But I was just very light-handed over there, so it just kind of faded off. If you do get ink over your bird, like if you ink some leaves over the bird, you can always go back in with your first stencil and put that back in place, go back over it with the red, and it should blend it out for the most part. I mean, if you're going in with a really dark green, you might have some trouble, but for the most part, if you tried to be light-handed in that area and you can still kind of see some of it, you should be able to just blend it out. So this card, the way that it is right now, I think, well, not right now, we still have to add those other leaves, but you get the gist of what I'm saying. Like just as a card on its own, I think is beautiful and is really pretty, and I would be more than happy to give that to somebody. But that is how it would be expected to be used, is you put your stencils down, you do your ink blending over top, and then you have a flat one layer card that you can give. So this one will be the easiest one we do, the least complicated one that we do. But I wanted to show you, even if the more complicated versions are not necessarily for you, either you have no desire to do it or you don't like the look of it, which is totally possible, you can do this with other more simple style of die cuts. I chose to do an ornament because I liked the way that looked, but you could also do like a really large like snowflake style shape. Alternatively, if you don't want to die cut through your stenciling pieces, you could stencil this whole thing like we just did here and then die cut out of another piece of cardstock and lay it over top, and you would still be able to get like the shaped version. So here, this is my ornament. It also has a topper and a little bow. So I'm die cutting the ornament out of the stenciled portion and then the bow out of red and the topper out of gold mirror cardstock. And then I'm just going to build this together. So my little holder will go on, and then I'll put the little bow right over top of that. I think that this is a darling little card. I like the way that all of them came out, but, well, no, probably the Barn's my favorite. This one's probably my second favorite, though. So I didn't like the stark white background. So again, we're gonna do a little bit more stenciling. This is the winter leaves. I've used this for way more than just winter. I've used this a bunch of different times, a bunch of different ways. And it's a staple one that I always go back to whenever I'm creating with Erin's stuff. So in order to keep it simple, I chose to use a green cardstock so that way I didn't have to do a whole bunch of ink blending in the background. And then I'm just layering various greens. So I started with the mowed lawn, then I'm going to go in with the rustic wilderness. And each time I'm turning the stencil, so that way I'm adding new leaves on top of the other leaves. And then the last one will be pine needles, which is a bit darker, a bit more of a blue-green than the yellow greens that we've been using, but everything works together really nicely. In order to create like a halo effect where it kind of leads the eye to the ornament, I am going to go in with the rustic wilderness and just go around the edges. So it leaves that highlighted portion in the center, which we will then put our ornament on. For this background, I chose to do a little bit of splattering in the background. So I'm going to do both the regular Perfect Pearls, which is the, Perfect Pearls in white. It's just called Perfect Pearl. And then I'm also going to do gold. And I did it also on the ornament, but you can see when I'm doing it, I am kind of putting my hand over the bird. I didn't want the bird to have the speckles. I just wanted it to kind of be in the background. So now that that's done, I did choose to pop this up. I cut the Noel and its shadow out. So I cut the Noel out of gold to match the ornament topper. I didn't love it with the shadow. I felt like it covered up too much of the ornament. So I chose to just cut a couple of more of those Noels and then stack them together so they'd have a little bit more thickness. The ornament I cut a second time out of foam so that way I wouldn't have to just waste my whole foam tape roll going through to pop it up. If you don't, because remember they're the same size, so if you don't like the fact that you will be able to see the foam right up against the edge, you can go in and just trim a little bit around the general shape of it. Doesn't have to be perfect, nobody's going to see it, but this will bring it in just a little bit, like I think I trimmed off maybe like 1/8 of an inch. It'll bring it in just a little bit so that the foam is still solid, like it has a solid lift. It's not going to bend in the mail or anything like that. But then you're not going to be able to see it on the edges. You'll have a little bit of a gap in between. So I'm going to put the foam down and then I'll go ahead and adhere that to the card. Normally what I do is like I do all my pieces parts and then I build all my cards together at the end. That is not what I did this time. I just built them all as I was doing them. I don't know. Do you guys prefer it one way or the other? I not that can make you any promises because I just create the way I create in the moment that I'm doing it. But just out of curiosity, if I wait all the way to the end to build them or if I go one at a time to like their completion. So now here's that Noel. I love this. She has another Noel die that's, I think, just solo by itself. This one is part of that Christmas, I think it's Christmas Greetings set. And I only used that one sentiment. They have a stamp and a die. I just used the die today, but all of those greetings came out of the same one, which you guys know how I feel about sentiment sets. I'm here for one that will do multiple duties for me. So I did add some gold pearls around the Noel, and then I used one of these. I think it's a black bauble from Trinity. I used just a very teeny tiny one for the eye of the bird, and then that is going to completely finish this card. I think he came out super cute. He's a nice little cardinal little ornament. He's all shiny and shimmery and adorable. So now the next one that we're going to do, again, this stencil is from last year, but I love it and I didn't get a chance to use it. This is the winter barn scene. And so basically it's really easy to follow because everything lines up with itself. I did the sky blue, and then here, this one also has trees on it, and in the example that Erin has on her website, she did use like the lighter blue for this portion of the trees, and it looks great, but I wanted mine to be the two different colors of green, because I like my cards to be matchy-matchy, and that's already what I have going on. So I'm just going to use a little bit of pixie tape. I'm going to mask off the sky, and then that way I can go in with my green and not worry that I'm going to get it in my sky. With this one, because we are going to be doing some layered die cutting, we're actually going to need more than one. So I ended up, overkill, believe me. I ended up doing 4 because I wanted to do 2 doors, but I actually only needed 2 because, I only used 1 door. That's just the truth of it. So this is me doing now the second one. I'm not going to show you all of them. I just wanted to make sure it was in the video so it was clear that you will need multiple of the same scene dependent upon what kind of scene you're building with your final card. So for this one, you need 2. For the last one, we're going to need more than 2. And then I just used that pixie tape stuck to itself. So I just used it again and moved it. So then now that that's done, moving on to the next layer, this is the greenery and the background, as well as is is it like steps or like a little bit of like leading into the barn, whatever leads into the barn, maybe just a little bit of dirt or mud or grass or whatever. So that's that area. And then this one here, this is the where I did the barn. So I have abandoned coral and I have the barn door, obviously fitting for what we're doing. And like, see how dark that is? I was like, ooh, that don't look right. That ain't right. And it wasn't right. So it helps to know your colors, I guess. So this one is just, that's the only thing that's there is just the barn door on this layer, or the barn, I should say, on that layer. And then this layer is the next layer of the trees. And again, I'm using the rustic wilderness and then just a little bit of the pine tree. So that will bring it together. This does have a layer in between that is the white, like where you see the white space on mine. It does have a layer for that. So if you wanted to use a paste to create like a 3D snow, or if you wanted to use a glitter paste to create a glittery snow, that is in there. But because I was die cutting mine, I chose not to do any of that, and I just left my white space white. I did go back in, I did the brown, but then I did go back in with black soot to do the roof of the barn and its windows. So now here's what we have. This is the barn door die from Erin Lee, and it has a door backer, which is just the panels. I'm going to line that up in the top left-hand corner because I want the barn. And the idea behind this was, I was putting it on the door almost like how you would create like a mural. So, but it would be on the actual door. So I'm going to line it up in the top left, and then I will tape it in place. Then for the next one, I'm going to also line up this die in the top left. And this is the top layers, like the little X of the door handle, all of those things, like the framework for the door, but I'm going to line it up in exactly the same spot on my second copy of the stencil. And then I'm going to die cut both of them. This will give me the opportunity to layer them on top of each other and create the door out of my stenciled scene. So that's what you see here. Is the one on the right is the panel that has the embossed panels in it. The one on the left is the one that's actually die cut. So the one that actually is die cut with the detail layer, I guess would be a way of saying it. I'm going to use that negative and I'm going to line it up over my panel. I'm going to make sure that this is lined up. The scene looks exactly how it should look. And then I am going to tape it in place so that it doesn't move around on me. I'm going to put the tape in the areas where I'm not going to be adhering anything. Obviously, I do have to move them around because I have pieces parts on the outside. But in order to build the inside, and then here I'm just popping out the door handle, it cuts it right out of the middle. I am going to just leave this in, and then I will put the glue onto the cardstock. So that way I'm sure I'm not getting any of the glue onto my negative piece. And I will start filling in all of these pieces right on top of each other. It should go together just like a puzzle. And when you're done, it should look like a completed scene. Everything should line up. That's why the negative is super helpful here, because we're not having to guess where it lines up. We already know it's going to line up because everything else in the scene is lined up already. So I went through, I did that. The bottom portion doesn't have any stenciling on it. It's just white. You still need it. You need it to complete the look. So don't skip that part just because you're gluing a white piece on top of a white piece. So go through, do that. And then once all of your pieces are in, we are going to untape it, and then we're going to shimmy the negative out. I did have to push part of the pieces down just to hold them down. But then once that's removed, then we have our door here with all of its detail, and it looks like a barn door, but it has like this painted mural on it. Now here you can see, I have the other door that I thought I was going to use, but I didn't end up using. I am coloring the handle in black, just black. I wasn't doing, it's meant to be a handle. So you could, I guess, technically try to fit it into the scene if you wanted to. I didn't feel the need to. I wanted it to look like a door, and a door has a handle. So I just went ahead and adhered those handles down. Now, again, this is when I thought I was going to be using both pieces so that it would be the full scene. But unless I wanted to change the size of card I was making, it wasn't getting my story across, I guess is a good way to say it. So instead, I'm going to use the panel that has like the embossed panels in it. I'm going to use that as the side of my barn. Here, this is a great testimony to a Trinity Beauty, or a Trinity, I was going to call it a beauty blender. That's what I put my makeup with. The Buddy blenders, because this is Distress ink on regular Nina 80-pound cardstock. And you can see how much color is going on. You'll see by the time we get to the end of the card, it's solid. You would never know that I inked this piece versus cutting it out a piece of red cardstock. It's completely solid and it's amazing. They are so good, you guys. They're so good. I mean, I have all of these different things that I ink blend with, but if I want saturated color, those are hands down my go-to. So now I did some brown ink blending for the ground, and here I'm going in with a C3 and I am adding in a shadow on my door. So that way it's going to help it look more dimensional. So just pick one side, the left or the right, for, your light source. And then you're going to put your shadows down and to the opposite side. So if I put my light source in the top right, my shadows will be down and to the left. I'm going to take my door. Now I've already committed to the fact that I'm just going to use one of these doors. I'm going to take my door and put it down just kind of off center. Because then I'll have room for my sentiment on the right hand side. So I'm sorry it's off screen. I'm just making sure everything is straight. Then because this panel is large enough, I'm going to adhere it to the right hand side so that it creates the side of my barn. Like you'll see me just push it up against there, and you can see there's a drastic amount of overhang. That overhang I'm actually going to use to complete the left-hand side of my barn. I'm just going to go in with some scissors. I'm going to trim that off, and then I will adhere that piece to the other side of the door. This just kept me from having to ink two pieces. And then once I have that glued down and adhered in place, I will trim off the very, very minimal excess that I have on that side. In order to complete the scene, I did go back in and add a little bit more shadow with my Copic markers. You just be careful not to hit your door because that white cardstock will just suck up that brown marker. So I did add a little bit of shadows. In order to create some texture, I did a little bit of stippling, basically just a series of dots. I did mine randomly just to kind of create a little bit of dirt. You could also do this as snow if you prefer. You could cut out like a little snowbank that would be right up against the door. I wanted something that would help the door pop. That's why I chose the brown. And then for the sentiment, again, I used the die. I cut it out of gold. I selected the Joy to the World one. This is one of the stencil pieces that I had left over that I didn't use. So I just turned it into a bonus card. That's the way that the stencil is intended to be used. I mounted it on some, with a green cardstock mat. And then the one that you see still kind of like the die that you still see sitting over there hanging out says Peace on Earth in a red mirror cardstock. And that's the sentiment I put on that. And actually I gave that to my mom 2 or 3 days ago. She has a girlfriend who does florals. She actually did my florals for my first wedding, and they were beautiful. But she always creates the swag that my mom takes to the cemetery for my grandmother and my grandfather. And so she wanted to, give her a Christmas card, little thank you. And so because she owns a farm and has horses and everything else, it was a very fitting card. It was perfect. So now we're on to the third one. This is a long video, guys. We got a lot of stuff. This is the winter church scene. And it's very, very pretty. It is very pretty. So I started with the hickory smoke in a very light application for the first part of the church. For the shaded part of the church, I went in with the hickory smoke full strength. For the roof, I did just the black. I was getting very nervous that my church was going to look like a haunted house instead of like a church. But once you start adding in all the other colors, it does work. I used yellow for the windows so that it looked like it was lighted. And then we're going to use the same greens for the trees. In this one, there is 2 trees, a much taller one, and then are there 2 or are there 3? No, there's 2. There's 2 trees. Anywho, so I started with my darker one this time, and then I'm going to go with the lighter one for the last layer, because I switched them from what I had been doing, because this last layer is like the tree portion that's in the most forefront, and then also it's on the edges of the tall tree, so it would have more light. And then there is a white layer here. And normally, like I did with the other one, I would have just left it. However, I wanted to do some ink blending in the background. Nobody is going to see this but me. Okay, you guys will not be able to see it. I'm just using some white pigment ink and I'm just pouncing it on right over top of the stencil. Pouncers are another great way to add a lot of intense color quickly. You're just not going to get as smooth of a blend. But if you're just using one color and you're not crazy like me and adding multiple colors, then that's fine. But the reason I added the white pigment is for exactly what I'm doing here. I can see the white pigment ink in person, and it's giving me a guideline for how far I can bring in my speckled egg. That is literally the only reason why I did the pigment ink. If you are not doing the exact same thing that we're doing here, you don't need to do this. You could just leave it white and it would be fine. So now this is the most complicated one. We are using the layering poinsettia, which I probably will use at another time. But we are using the layering poinsettia to layer on top of itself and build our scene within the shape of our flower. So I've die cut the largest one first. I'm going to use that negative to lay over the second piece to get the placement for my smaller flower. Once I'm happy with where this is, I'm going to tape this in place to the bottom layer. Okay, you don't want to tape it to the top, because we're going to, again, work our little negative piece out. And then that way we'll just have the die in its direct spot that we need it. I can further tape this down to make sure it isn't going to move, and then die cut that as well. You're going to want to save all of these negative pieces. We'll need it for building the actual card. So you can see how they're lining up. It's going to recreate the scene, but it's going to recreate the scene in the shape of the flower. In order to get as much of the scene as I possibly could, I am also going to cut leaves. So again, I am using that largest die cut for the placement of my leaves, because this is how much surface area will already be covered. And then I will be able to use the leaves to get the trees that would otherwise be left out. I also die cut the berry portion out of the center using this same piece. So for this one, we need 3 layers. For the background piece, I am just, again, using the speckled egg. I did do some more splatters on top of here. I went to go with the perfect pearls, but I ended up getting some of the gold in there as well. So it's like a weird combination of a white and a light gold. It's fine. It worked. It's no big deal. So now that that is dry, I'm going to start with the bottom layer, which is the leaves. I'm going to lay that in place. And again, we're going to go in and adhere all of these pieces using the negative to help us inlay them. And then we'll move out the negative piece. So I know that these aren't going to be for everybody. I don't even know if I would necessarily I would do some of them again. I really like the barn door. I think that's kind of fun. And it's definitely a different look. I really like the ornament. Would I do this one again? I'm not sure. This one might be better suited for cutting doing the stencil in the background and then cutting the large poinsettia out of another piece of cardstock and then layering that on top. So you would only see. This one might be better suited for that. Am I sorry I did it? No, because everything is a learning experience and I'm sharing it with you, and then maybe you'll take inspiration from it and you'll do something else a different way, or maybe you really like this way and you'll do this as well. I think that it's important to share all of the things, whether we just liked them or we super extra loved them, because you never know how you're inspiring somebody else. So Plus, I do think this poinsettia layering die is beautiful. Maybe I did it a disservice by doing this. I'm not really sure. But for sure, it's gorgeous. And I love the detail that's embossed into it. And it's a good large size. You guys know how I feel about big florals. I like big florals, and I cannot lie. So each time we're doing the next layer, you can see we're changing out the negative piece. So in order to put down the biggest flower, I used its negative. In order to put down the smallest flower, I am using its negative. The only time I did not use the negative for placement is this tiny little berry portion, because it was pretty obvious to me where it went. So I didn't feel like I needed to put the negative back down. I felt like I could just eyeball it and be fine. So right out the gate, I've noticed I don't have a lot of contrast here. I have a lot of white in my flower. And so in order to create some contrast from the background, I'm going to go in, this is that same C3 marker you saw before, and I'm using it to go around the edges that are white. And this is going to help them stand out, because it is going to create a little bit of that missing contrast from the background. If I had done this on a darker background, would I be having the same problem, or would I feel the same way about the card or the technique? Probably not. But I didn't. I have a matchy problem, and I wanted them to be matchy, and I had used the speckled eggs in the other ones. So I just made the decisions that I made. Now I have to live with them. Such is life. So here I'm going in with a C1 and just blending those out. That is creating more of a contrast, which I do love. I put down the sentiment. It says Christmas greetings, and I die cut that out of a mirrored silver. And that is from Concord 9th. And then I'm using these brushed silver to fill in the center of the flower. Necessary? I don't really know. Around the sentiment, yes, I think it is. I think you need the pearls or gemstones or something to fill in that area and make it feel cohesive. I also added a little bit of shimmer to the lights. And then around the scene where there should be snow, I did add just some clear shimmer. And then that's it. That's all 3 cards. Plus I got that bonus card for, with the barn. So it was a successful crafting session. I hope that you were inspired. I will have my final Christmas card of the season video up tomorrow. And then we'll be moving on past Christmas. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but that's what's happening. So thank you guys so much for joining me. I always appreciate your time, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.